Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and I am joined by Dan Dicks of Press for Truth, and of course Jeff Berwick from the Dollar Vigilante and the host of Anarchast, and we are going to talk about Bilderberg as we are approaching the 2016 Bilderberg Group meeting and subsequent protest on June 9th to 12th in Dresden, Germany. And I figured it would be good to kind of go over what Bilderberg is and what the plan is this year, as well as some of the things that we've seen from past years. As, of course, last year, a lot of us were watching as Jeff Berwick, Dan Dicks, and Luke Rudkowski were, basically pulling the New World Order by its feathers, and they're doing excellent work out there. They were able to expose some incredible stuff and some of the stuff first of its kind. So I'd like to, without further ado, get right into it. So I'm going to start randomly with one of them. Okay, so Jeff, what do you think goes on at Bilderberg every year?
Well, actually, let's let Dan start off because I think this is his 10th Bilderberg. I went for the first time last year, and I was quite amazed just to see what's all going on and what people like Dan and Luke are doing. So I would pose that first question to Dan, and because he's got so much experience on it.
Well, absolutely. I know Dan has done the documentary Turning Point, has done incredible work at Bilderberg, has confronted countless members. I've confronted David Frum, Bush's speechwriter, and Conrad Black, the steering committee member, but it pales in comparison to the work that Dan and Luke has done over the years, confronting Bilderberg members, holding them accountable. So, Dan, what do you think goes on at Bilderberg?
Well, we know as you said, we've been covering this for 10 years now. The first one I covered was in 2006. And knowing that the minutes are never published, the agendas are never really made public, people are essentially kind of only ever really left to speculate about what goes on in there. So, that's all we can really do is speculate about what is talked about in there. But, if I may, if I could do that for a moment, personally, I think that, last year, me and Luke got to actually see the inside of the Bilderberg room where, all the people sit together. I think a lot of the major things happen in those scenarios, but I think what goes on in Bilderberg, where the real nitty-gritty things happen, the real backdoor deals happen, is when somebody like a Henry Kissinger or a Rothschild representatives pulls one of these young new attendees to the side and maybe has a little private conversation at the bar. And I think that's where a lot of the things at Bilderberg get done behind the scenes. Again, admittedly, this is pure speculation. But just from an educated guess, I get the feeling that those are the kind of shady things that go on at Bilderberg where they can influence certain people and guide them in a certain direction. I think a lot of those conversations happen on the golf course, at the bar, at the cigar room, and these types of things. We got to remember, this is a 3-day event. Lots of conversations going on there behind the scenes.
Absolutely, and I know the work that people like yourself and Luke Rudkowski have done in confronting these members is crucial in learning, because we see a lot of discrepancies between members that are confronted, and I've seen people like, from my own personal experience talking with David Frum, Bush's speechwriter, he claimed that the EU was actually created at Bilderberg when he was there, and then we talked to people like Conrad Black, who was on the steering committee from 1981 onward, and he says that that's bogus, that the EU wasn't created there, and that they only talked about Russia. And then we get other guys that are saying that the group doesn't even exist, which obviously is something that would make anyone with the ability to think suspicious. And I was wondering, like, Jeff, Dan, can you go into what you witnessed last year, going into the conference room, how it went down, how you accomplished this? I'll let Jeff start off with this one.
Well, again, I think we should start with Dan. He was the one that went into the conference room with Luke. I was there. As I pointed out, it was my first one, and I was almost just going along just to see if what they were saying was right. See what, it's not like I don't trust Luke and Dan. They're both good friends, but just to see with my own eyes. I always have to see with my own eyes. And it was quite amazing, the amount of security, the amount of secrecy. We somehow got in. Sometimes I get lucky that way, so we found a way to get in. But once they found out that we were in there, we were pretty quickly taken out. But it's really interesting because last year we went to the G7 meeting, which was in Munich, Germany, just down the road, like literally 1 or 2 hours down the road, and it was all the world's media, and they were partying like it was the Hunger Games. It was ridiculous. There was $10,000 bottles of champagne. Then, they'd get whisked off. Oh, Barack Obama is going to drink a beer. Everyone grab your cameras, and they'd go run off. Then they come back to this big, massive party. Everything, all expenses paid for. And everyone we talked to, we said, hey, right after this is actually the where they actually talk about what they're going to do, not just photo ops and stuff. No one had heard of it. And even when we went to Bilderberg, so down the road in Austria, we were shocked to find out the White House press corps was there. And so Dan and Luke and myself, we talked to them. We're like, oh, you guys are actually going to cover Bilderberg. And they're like, what's Bilderberg? They'd never heard of it. They were actually they stayed there for the G7. We're flown in through helicopters to the G7 and then back to this hotel where Bilderberg was going to be held the very next day after they left. And not one of them had heard of it. And when we told them about it, they basically said they didn't care. They're not allowed to cover those sort of things. They pretty much said, we just read off teleprompters. And they said to us, they said, you guys are the real journalists. We're not. We're actors, is essentially what they said.
Yeah. Well, and with the fact that the head of transparency was at the Bilderberg meeting last year and wasn't transparent enough to say what was going on, says a lot right there. For example, a lot of people might wonder what exactly does go on in Bilderberg, and of course there isn't any way of exactly saying what's happening, but we do know that they do have a layout on their website that basically says, today we will talk about economics, tomorrow we will talk about foreign policy. But of course that's as far as they go into that. And when you see people like the Queen Beatrix, the owner of Shell, we have people like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, presidents, prime ministers, bankers, the top businessmen, the top dignitaries, and they are all together. You would think that the media would be talking about that. However, that's part of the mystery. That's part of the reason why there's so many suspicions about what goes on there, is because they don't talk about it. There's basically a muzzle on the media, and every now and then you might see one story come out of the Huffington Post that loosely kind of says, well, these crazy Alex Jones types are over there, rustling feathers, but, there's nothing really to see here. And we know that that's not the case. Dan, can you talk about some of the confrontations you've done with Bilderberg members and what you've learned from these confrontations?
Sure. Well, first of all, just to address why you're going to get such things from places like the Huffington Post is because the owner and editor-in-chief of Huffington Post Canada is Heather Reisman, who's actually on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group. So that's what people begin to discover through time, is that there is a deep connection with the media and any kind of print media, video, within Bilderberg. So that's simply why we're not getting this information out. As far as confronting them, I've had quite a few, a lot of confrontations. Canadians, we've had prime ministers like Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin and newly selected Justin Trudeau. I've confronted all of these guys. Alan Gottlieb, former Premier Mike Harris. And when we were there in Copenhagen a few years ago, we got Peter Sutherland. He is the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and another there was a young Irishman who was his first time attendee at Bilderberg. We got him as well. I'm probably forgetting a few. We got Wolfenson, the head of former head of the World Bank.
Didn't Wolfenson claim that he wasn't even there?
he tried to say he wasn't there and doesn't remember what they talked about and just kind of laughed it all off. So it's a growing list, happy to say, and I can't wait to add some new people to that list, because that's what it comes down to. That's why we do the things that we do, is to hold these guys accountable, not only document who's attending, what sort of things might be on the agenda this year, but guess what? Here's your face for the world to see. We're going to make them famous if we can.
Absolutely, and that is what the new media is all about, is asking the questions that the old media, the old dinosaur media, won't talk about. And now switching from that to the bankers that are there, like one of the most incredible confrontations I've ever seen was by Luke Rudkowski of Jacob de Rothschild, which is just as ballsy as it gets. Going up to a Rothschild isn't exactly the way to success, to say the least. And the Rothschilds obviously have their hands in the financial system globally, and we see a lot of other bankers and people associated with the financial system at the Bilderberg meetings. And now, Jeff, what do you think they are doing? Because we're seeing all of these globalist financiers heading over there. As I mentioned, David Frum said that the EU was created at Bilderberg. So what do you think, what kinds of things, out of speculation, do you think they are up to?
Well, truthfully, I don't know. I have no idea. And that's the whole point of trying to find out, because we know they are all going there. And we know that they're not going there to have a big meeting about how to bring individual liberty to every person on earth. They're all going there in general with the same agenda, which is to move towards globalization, a one world government. Very obvious in how they talk and who goes to these events and what they're doing. And these are incredibly powerful people, the people who own pretty much everything. So as far as what they talk about, I have no idea at all. But I think we have to expose them. And at least if the regular media, which obviously isn't going to cover it because they want to keep it quiet just like everyone else, isn't going to cover it, someone else has to. So we're just filling that niche. And for me personally, as a dollar vigilante, and I cover, of course, I say I'm a freedom fighter against mankind's two biggest enemies, the government and the central banks. And the central banks are a huge part of the problem in the world today. I actually haven't even looked at who's going this year. I'm so busy. I thought it was so interesting to go last year that I thought I should go again this year. And it just turns out that almost every summer I go to Dresden, Germany. There's a family relations there. And so it really just kind of worked out. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go again this year. I'm not expecting necessarily to find out exactly what they're doing or anything, but I want them to know that we know that they're there and that we are watching. And it looks like a lot of people, from what I can tell, are going to be showing up as well, and just letting them know. I don't know, for example, if they really make any massive decisions at this meeting. It might just be sort of get together, as Dan pointed out, maybe bring in some new people into the fold, find out who they can use for what to their agendas and things like that. But just the fact that no one covers it, that they try to, even as Dan pointed out, that one World Banker guy or whoever he was, that was right after the conference. He was at the airport. He had just left, and Dan pretty much had followed him to the airport and said, "Were you at Bilderberg?" And he's like, "No, I've never heard of it." And so we have to put the camera in these guys' faces. And you're right. That this is what the new media needs to do. And you said that the media is not really covering Bilderberg, and actually you're wrong. The media is covering Bilderberg. Press for Truth is there. We Are Change is there. The Dollar Vigilante is there. You're doing your thing, Josh, covering this as well. And I don't know if you're going to be able to make it or not, but you're trying to cover it as well. So the media is covering it. The propaganda, the world-controlling globalist complete propaganda media is not covering it, but that's to be expected.
Absolutely. Well, it all comes down to us in the independent media world trying to inform people, because once there's enough awareness, of course, there can be action, and once there's action, there will be answers eventually, and some of these people will have to answer for what they've done, and we are learning more and more every year thanks to people like yourself. And I know you've got your eye on the financial world, Jeff, and obviously a lot of the people that you are looking at that are pushing the one world government, one world currency are at Bilderberg, and obviously that says a lot. Obviously it means that there is some kind of talk going on, and we are left out of that conversation. And when it comes down to transparency, they try to avoid or escape any claims that they are personally trying to create some kind of world government. But then why are all these world leaders that are bickering at each other one day meeting together, having some drinks, and having a conference at Bilderberg? I mean, knowing what we've seen in the past from other certain kinds of meetings, like things like Bohemian Grove, it's worth the question. What are they doing when these guys are chanting in front of a giant statue of Moloch? How could we not ask questions? And I think that comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but the evidence is out there, and there's no excuse anymore to not know about this stuff because it is out there now. I know the great work of Jim Tucker, who was reporting on Bilderberg from 1975 to his death in April 2013. He is missed by many, and I'd like to ask, I know, Dan, you've been to Bilderberg in years when Jim Tucker was there. Can you speak on what you know about Jim and how crucial he was to exposing Bilderberg?
Oh, absolutely. If anybody's not familiar with Jim Tucker, they need to be. The guy was an absolute trailblazer, and we really owe a lot of credit to guys like him for, setting the pace there and being the first one to do it. He was exposing these guys, tracking these guys back in the 50s and 60s. Tucker's been around for a long time. So back in Chantilly in 2012, I had an opportunity to meet Tucker and learn from him and just kind of see his investigative journalism style. And he's an old school styled guy. He liked to drink a lot, apparently. A lot of these old school guys are like that. And I don't know, man, there was just something about him that was very, very real. You could just tell he was the real deal. But since his passing, I think a lot of guys have taken up the torch and begin doing what he did. And one of the things that was special about Jim is he had a lot of contacts. He had moles on the inside. He often had people who would leak the agendas, the locations to him beforehand. Well, that torch has been passed now, and hopefully that the tradition can continue so that we can continue to expose these guys. And what he did, which was so important, is to begin to figure out what sort of things they're going to be talking about before anybody else was talking about this. So that's the things we need to carry on. In that tradition, moving forward, talking a little bit about the things that we may be seeing this year on the agenda, I think it's important to note that every 4 years in an election cycle, Bilderberg is usually held in North America. It is a little bit odd that it's being held in Germany on the election year in the United States. So I do think Hillary Clinton obviously is going to be a big part of the agenda in securing the presidency for her. But the fact that it's being held in Europe, in Germany, and allegedly Angela Merkel has been invited this year, and we know that there's this influx in Europe of these ISIS-embedded refugees, allegedly. I think that's going to be a topping point as well this year as to how to utilize ISIS to their advantage once again to move forward and take over more areas of the Middle East, like Iran and eventually Syria as well. So those are some of the things we have to look out for: the American presidential race, things going on in the Middle East, and of course the crackdown on the internet. I don't think we're going to be seeing any slowdown of that from Bilderberg this year either.
There's certainly a lot of those things will be on the agenda. There's no doubt about that. These are very prevalent issues, manufactured issues. And I just want to quickly go back regarding Jim Tucker because I just remember this guy back before anyone even knew what Bilderberg was, back before anyone was reporting on it. There's a certain air of safety reporting Bilderberg now compared to what it used to be, thanks largely to the work of people like Jim Tucker, because a lot of us have seen the footage of Jim back in the 90s when very few people were talking about Bilderberg at all. He was showing up with like 5 people, and Jim was getting chased by black SUVs or black cars out of the meeting area and almost run off the road. And he had incredible footage from that going back to the 1990s. And I just want to commend the incredible work that Jim Tucker had done in the past, because if it weren't for him, he blazed a trail and he risked himself incredibly easily. He could have been killed. We know how these guys operate, and he made it possible for more people to be able to report on this without worrying about their safety. And it's just an incredible thing. Now, Dan, I wanted to kind of go into this because, of course, a few years ago in Copenhagen, you were arrested alongside Luke. And I just, can you go into a bit of what happened that year? Because this is a great example of how tough they are on journalists who are simply trying to get the information out there.
Sure. We had a golden opportunity present itself because we made ourselves available and made sure we were going to be there. And just from simply being there and hanging out, sure enough, the steering committee showed up, and they were just a couple of tables over. These ladies just sitting there having a drink, and me and Luke and some of the other people who were with us there at the time kind of talked to each other, and we all said, "Is that who we think it is?" And once we made sure that we knew that these are definitely the steering committee ladies, me and Luke took a deep breath and we said, let's do this. And we hit record on our cameras. We got up from our table and we went over there and we started just asking them, hey, are you the ladies from the Bilderberg steering committee? And the reaction, I love the reaction on the one lady where she whips her head around and goes, what? It's like... If you've never heard the word Bilderberg, if you don't know what this is, you would not have a reaction like that. You'd be like, I'm the head of what? What are you talking about, kid? But the reaction was so obvious that they were just busted red-handed. So sure enough, security guards come up to me and Luke and, kind of try to manhandle us there and called the police. And, they were being intimidating to me, saying, we know who you are, Dan. We know what you do. You're going to have to wait here till the police come. And eventually the police came. They did take me and Luke downtown. We got arrested. They, searched us and threw us into a cell. I can tell you a quick little story if we have time. A very
absolutely
funny little thing they did to us, a psychological thing that they did to me and Luke. We were placed in separate cells. And so while I was being held and Luke was being held, we both all of a sudden heard someone being strip searched and the officer saying, you're an international traveler. You are here from another country. Take your pants off. Pants down. And so I am automatically thinking it's Luke. Luke is automatically thinking that it's me. And both of us are sitting in our cells thinking, oh boy, any second now they're going to walk in with a big rubber glove. Say, hey, boys, welcome to Copenhagen. Now you're going to think twice about research in Bilderberg. But that thankfully never did happen. So maybe they were just playing games with their heads, or maybe it was somebody being strip searched. But just a funny little story. I thought.
Well, I know that when you were in locked up there, I remember calling the prison in Copenhagen, and I remember them pretending not to speak English when I was asking about yourself and Luke, and no English. And I remember thinking it was kind of humorous because other people would also call and they would get on the line with someone who was speaking English, and it was just absurd. But what do you think about that cop? Because I remember watching that officer screaming in you guys' face when they were arresting you, and it just seemed extremely abusive. What did they do after those cameras were off?
You know what? It's important to always stand your ground. You'll notice in that footage, he tells me to turn the camera off maybe 5 or 6 times. And every single time he said, I responded with either a question or just saying, I simply can't do that. I just can't do that. And he said, no, you have to turn it off. I'm a police officer. You have to listen to me. And I'd respond with, well, I'm documenting evidence. I may need to use this later in court or something like that. And I continuously just talked with them like that until he just wouldn't have it anymore. And he just physically reached over and grabbed Luke's camera and started to delete the footage. And Luke managed to recover some of that footage. They didn't delete any of mine, which I was really surprised. When I got out of the prison cell, we got our cameras back. I went through the footage, and it was all still there. Luke was missing some, but he managed to recover it. So, yeah, they kind of manhandled us a bit down there, threw us into the cell for 3-4 hours, and then pretty much let us go, and that was the end of it, because they had nothing on us. We had done nothing wrong, so They
Oh, what a jerk. And you know, it's hard when you're in another country. One might know a decent amount of the law in their home country or maybe, you know, nearby countries like the United States, for example. But when you're in a place like Copenhagen, it's not like you have had a whole bunch of time to read up on every single thing that they, you know, proclaim by law in that country. So it's hard to really know your rights.
you know, we always do. Luke and I will often look up the laws in a certain country that we're going to, especially when we're going to be doing audio recording and video recording secretly. And we did look that up and found out that it was within our rights to be doing so. So that's why we were able to speak so confidently to those security guards and to those police officers, because we actually did know the law and knew that we were abiding within it.
Absolutely. Well, okay, so this year, we're looking at June 9th to 12th in Dresden, Germany. Jeff, can you explain, and I'll pass it on to Dan after, your plan for this year in Dresden? Because, of course, there is absolute chaos in Germany right now. It's not easy to escape that when you look up Germany and what's anything, any town, any city in Germany. It's absolute chaos. Merkel is, well, I have a lot of words about her, but I'll leave it to you, Jeff. What's your plan this year at Bilderberg, and how will you be tackling this issue that we are watching Germany basically collapse in on itself?
Well, I have no real plan. I didn't have any plan last year. I think that's always almost the best way to go. I just want to be around, see what's going on. We're going to be arriving early. I actually don't want to give away too much information on what I plan to do and what I have in mind. I do have some things, but if I said them, then they wouldn't work. But I have some very interesting things I'm going to attempt to do while I'm there. I'm very connected in Dresden, Germany, so this is going to be interesting. They're kind of coming into a bit of one of my hometowns a little bit. But as far otherwise, I'm just going to see, it looks like there's going to be quite a large protest. A number of people, I know that on the Dollar Vigilante, Anonymous Denmark said they're going to join us at Bilderberg. I don't know who they are or what they are, but they said they're coming. Excellent. Then there's a big one, something like Antifa is going to do a big thing. I know that Luke Rudkowski knows the people from End the Fed Germany, which is actually the biggest End the Fed movement in the world. They used to, up until recently, they had 10,000 people come out every week to protest the Federal Reserve, which was amazing in Germany. You'd think someone would do that in Washington, but now the Americans are so asleep. But Germans kind of remember hyperinflation and kind of remember how things go pretty bad when you go down this road. So I don't know if they're coming, but I wouldn't doubt it. So I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm really just going to go with the flow, see what's happening. We're going to be staying in and around the Bilderberg Hotel during the conference and just covering what's happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to go too far into what the exact plans are, of course, because then we won't be able to witness or watch these incredible videos that you guys will surely be putting out when you are in Dresden, and we're all looking forward to that. Dan, who are some of the people that you are planning to meet up with out there?
Well, I'm going to be, as you know, hooking up with Jeff and Luke, and there will be some sort of an event. You know, we don't know at this point. Like we said, we don't put a whole lot of planning into how we're going to confront Bilderbergers. Those kind of things just happen. Yeah. When you present yourself into these opportunities, you know, these opportunities present themselves when you just go there. So that's what we're going to do, is just go there. But no, people can get involved, and there is. We do have people who are going to try to come together and have a bit of a unified voice. We're offering our Investigate Bilderberg T-shirts. We started a campaign. Teespring campaign. It's teespring.com/Investigate Bilderberg, I believe. I'm sure you could probably get a link for us in the description. And hopefully people will show up wearing the Investigate Bilderberg T-shirts so that these guys can see that we are coming together as a unit here to defeat the Bilderbergers. So that would be cool if people want to check that out. Hopefully, Josh, you can have a link in the description to where they can get that and show their support for me and Jeff and Luke that way as well.
Absolutely. And wrapping up, what is your main goal? What do you want to see over the next 10 years regarding Bilderberg? Jeff?
Goal over the next 10 years, what I'd want to see, no governments, no central banks exist. Bilderberg is pointless because there's nothing to control. There's 7 billion free human beings on this planet, all transacting voluntarily with each other, creating a peaceful and prosperous world like we've never known it.
Absolutely. Beautiful idea right there. Dan?
Yeah, that's kind of tough to top. I would say that's pretty much what we ought to be aspiring to as well. And just, I would hope that in 10 years from now, Bilderberg is not just irrelevant, they are completely non-existent because that shift will have occurred, as Jeff said.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys very much for joining me. You guys could the viewers can check out Jeff Berwick's stuff, of course, at the Dollar Vigilante and Anarchast. Always incredible guests, always incredible conversations and reports, as well as Press for Truth. Dan Dicks has been doing incredible work for many years. You can check out the documentary Turning Point as well, which details a lot of the issues that we're talking about here today. And I thank you guys for the incredible work you're doing. And I also have to pass it over to Luke Rudkowski. We Are Change. Check him out. Of course, there will be a lot of incredible work coming out of there too. And this is a new media. This is a new movement, and it's kind of a revolution. These things weren't very possible 20 years ago, even 15, even 10 years ago, really, to the extent that they are today. And it's a really beautiful thing to watch as people are starting to learn more about individualism, the truth, freedom in general, and it's just a good time to be alive, even as things collapse around us. More people are learning, more people are taking action, and I invite everyone out there to be the new media as well. All it takes in the beginning is really taking out your camera, asking questions, going up to public figures, saying what you believe, putting that out on the internet. It's not a multi-million-dollar operation anymore, so I urge people to please be the media, be the change you wish to see. And I thank you two very much for the incredible work you do, and we'll be talking soon. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.